Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 294 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Con Whiteley. And today's episode is on: Are all barriers to clinical psychology the same height? And it is Saturday, the 3rd of November 2024 as I record this. So today's episode is a really fun one, and it's such a useful one because, as we've all known, because I've spoken about this before, this is a major topic within clinical psychology, and this is a very well-known area that everyone is trying to tackle. But clinical psychology is dominated by white middle-class females, and whilst this is good, this does mean that clinical psychology isn't the most diverse profession, which is absolutely critical when it comes to helping our clients, because our clients prefer people who are like them. So if you're like a black person, then like a white middle class female might not be the best suit for you. Equally, if you're like a man, then a female therapist might not be the best fit for you, even though I have done a podcast episode before on how your therapist's gender doesn't actually matter to therapeutic success, because everything boils down to the therapeutic alliance. But sometimes a therapeutic alliance is easier to develop when your therapist is like you. So this is just one of the many reasons why getting a diverse range of professionals within clinical psychology is flat out critical. So that's why we're focusing on today's podcast episode, and this is an extract from my brand new book, Clinical Psychology Reflections, Volume 5. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest. And the first one is Recognising the Haves and Have-Nots. When do people start to notice and treat others differently based on wealth? A new investigation finds it may be earlier than you think. A recent study from Annie and Elson et al. Aimed to pin down when perceiving wealth begins to change how we act towards others. Described recently in the Journal of Experimental Psychology General, this North American team sought to understand whether infants are able to track differences in wealth and whether they evaluate individuals differently based on their wealth. Though it may sound early, their findings suggest that children begin to differentiate others through markers of wealth at around 15 months. See how they arrived at this conclusion in the BPS Research Digest write-up. So there's a few things I want to say about this study. For starters, this is quite scary in terms that we live in a society where even at a young age, children are exposed to the different messages about wealth, saying that wealthy people need to be treated differently to poorer people. That's not how the world's meant to work whatsoever. So that's definitely something to unpack for the future. And now that we've got this research, after this has been replicated, ideally in a few more cultures, to see if this is a North America problem, or if this is a universal human behaviour. It'd be interesting to see if there are differences between individualistic cultures and collectivist cultures. It'd be interesting to see if there's any interventions we can create that helps decrease some of this bias and some of this welfare-based behaviour. So it'd be very good to see if we can apply this theory and these findings into something more practical in the future. Because the problem is that if we teach children at a very young age to treat people differently based on wealth, then that's going to have quite stark implications as they grow older, because this isn't going to help us tackle wealth inequality, and welfare redistribution. So quite interesting, a little concerning, but at least we've now got this research, so now the next step is about applying it to the real world. The next one is, electrical smiles spark better moods. Can the physical act of smiling make you feel happier? According to the facial feedback hypothesis, it can. However, the idea that facial muscles can influence our emotions has been hotly debated, with research in the field producing notoriously mixed results. New work by Fias Nicola Elpelin at the University of Sussex and colleagues adds a fresh twist to the investigation, using electrical stimulation to manipulate some facial muscles involved in smiling and frowning. The team were able to subtly manipulate Parkinson's expression, ultimately finding small but significant effects on mood. Okay, so my point of view on this is, you all know I'm not a fan of social priming research. I don't like priming because it's one of the major factors in the replication crisis, which really damaged psychology's reputation, especially as a science. So this just sounds like more social priming research and different sorts of priming, and well, priming there, but that if you do something, it's going to make you feel something. And yes, I understand that there is good research saying that what our physical bodies do does affect our psychological processes. Trauma responses are a brilliant example of that, but a simple smile to make us feel better? I think it's more complicated than that. Or I don't think that this is this grand finding that definitely works, that some researchers are trying to make it out to be. So besides that, there's nothing more I can actually say on that. So the last one is, early sensitivity shape kids' mental health journeys. Differences in sensitivity in young people are sometimes referred to as the dandelion orchid dichotomy. Orchid children, like the flowers, are deeply sensitive to contextual factors, whilst dandelion children are less affected by their environment. How these different levels of sensitivity affect children's mental health over time is relatively unexplored. In their latest study, published in Developmental Science, a University of Pennsylvania team looks to explore exactly how much psychosocial influences, such as praise, can impact the behavior of children with these different levels of sensitivity. Ultimately, the authors say, understanding these dynamics could allow us to make better early predictions about future mental health difficulties and improve access to early interventions for family that need them most. Okay then, now I'm going to skip over quite a lot of this because there's one bit I really like and I'm trying to stop myself from laughing here. So let's say that these authors are correct, and I really hope that they are. Let's say that we actually are able to make better earlier predictions about future mental health difficulties. Their next step is improve access to early interventions for families that need them most. I cannot see that working in the current state of the world. I really cannot. Because in the person I'm going to talk about something that happened this week to me. Because I thought, I need some urgent help. I'm going to go and get it. So the issue with mental health services, and I think the same is for America. Hell, I think it definitely is, because of the health insurance and how difficult that can be for quite a lot of families. I also think that in the UK, because of the clinical cut-offs, and because in the NHS, because it's been so crippled by various governments over the years, they only accept you if you are absolutely dying and if you're about to kill yourself. I cannot see that some research that says that these children need more support for the future. I don't think that's going to have any real world impact. And honestly, it's heartbreaking I have to even say that. Because if we have this research that shows this group of the children, at no fault of their own, are going to need more help in the future, but we can't give it to them. That is disgraceful. Because we've got the research. Mental health, clinical psychology, the public health system, welfare systems are meant to be led by research and evidence. If we have the research to say something works or something is going to happen, for example, orchid children need more support in the future, and this research shows that they need early interventions, then we should be giving it to them. It's simple as that. But because of how the healthcare system is, and how crippled it's been, and how unfit it is for the 21st century, we cannot do that. And as a society, that makes us failures, and that is something that needs to change urgently. So, jumping off my little soapbox, I really hope you enjoyed the psychology news section. So let's move on to the person update. So moving on to the person update. This week has been very interesting because it's definitely been a story of two halves though. Some interesting thing about Monday and Tuesday was that Monday I basically was having panic attacks for 18 hours straight, which led to me collapsing quite a bit. And can I just say that having panic attacks for that long is not fun because your body gets really, really weak, and if you basically feel like your heart's going to explode, that is not fun though. So that was something that I've learned, and so I had to deal with that though. The reason why I bring it up is because, in case there are any listeners that are really, really hesitant to do contact lines and helplines for their mental health though, because I was very, very resistant to the idea. Like, I did not want to contact any helplines. I did not want to use any online chat functions because I just didn't want to. I seriously didn't, because I don't really know why. I just really didn't want to use them. But my best friend eventually got me to use one of them, and I've used 2 online chats this week, and they're really helpful. Like, I was actually quite shocked that even though the person I was speaking to, at least the first time, wasn't that validating, wasn't that supportive, and she wasn't saying anything new whatsoever, anything that I didn't know, by the time the 45 minutes was up, well, no, it was only like 35 minutes, because 45 minutes was the limit. I did feel a lot better, which I was a bit annoyed about, because it was a case of, why has this made me feel good, even though you've not said anything new? So if you're reluctant, and if you think you need a helpline, then definitely contact them. Definitely reach out, because it can be a lot more beneficial than you think. Also, something that I found very interesting was that on a Tuesday, because of my lack of eating, I actually made myself very physically ill, which leads to the interesting part. So, in the UK, to be able to get any mental health support, you need to go to your medical doctor. So my medical doctor is about a 40-minute drive away, because I've not changed my GP address at the moment, even though I've sort of got to at this point. So I drove up to where I used to live back in before I moved down to like Canterbury. What happened was that I went to my medical doctor. He took one look at me. So I point blank said to him, right, I've got an eating disorder. Can you please help me and refer me to the eating disorder team? He took one look at me. And basically dismissed me. He asked me the standard 5 eating disorder questions, which presumably was made up by some medical doctor. I got 2 out of 5, which means I'm not that severe, apparently, according to him though, even though I've made myself physically ill the day before. Now, the interesting thing about that was it was basically a 10-15 minute appointment. He could not give me any sort of clinical interview. He could not actually talk to me about why I was feeling this way, or my eating habits, or anything. And all he literally did was he went back to the body mass index. Now, I've done a podcast episode before about how that is ridiculous and how the BMI is one of the worst things ever because it actually doesn't actually gauge how healthy you are because it's all based on a statistical model which doesn't actually work in reality. So what happened was that he asked me some questions which I was heavily biased against. I know now in hindsight I lied on one of them because I didn't want to admit it to myself. Also, I just didn't feel that comfortable talking to him though, because it was a case of you get in, all that you do. So he took my weight, he took my height, so he could calculate my BMI, and he basically said that I was fine. I was fine there. Which is interesting considering I've been losing a kilogram a week for the past 2 months, which is a bit concerning considering that's extremely unhealthy. So then and then all he basically did to me was he booked me in for a blood test, which I now researched is one of the signs about eating disorders. But also, he also then said to me, are you depressed and anxious? And I was like, no, not really, not anymore. I used to be because of my trauma. And then he was like, okay, then I'll just refer you to the mental health team for an assessment. I was like, I'm not depressed. I'm not anxious. Well, panic attacks would say it differently, but generally, I am not depressed, so that is not an explanation for my loss of appetite. I was very frustrated about that, and yes, I am not happy with the NHS. I'm not happy with medical doctors. I should have been allowed to see a clinical psychologist immediately who actually understands eating disorders, who actually understands mental health. Medical doctors should not be allowed to touch mental health in any capacity. That is my strong opinion on that matter. And yes, I get it will be controversial, but if I had been allowed to see a clinical psychologist who actually studies, lives and breathes mental health, maybe my results could have been a little more positive. So I'm not impressed, and it's also just a case of this is why I hate the biomedical model with all my heart. All my heart, I hate the biomedical model, especially because I've been talking to some friends recently who were having a hard time. They've just been given antidepressants, no psychological support, nothing in great depth, just no diagnoses, no nothing. This is ridiculous. I hate the mental health system that is when it's run by medical doctors. I will say that to the day I die. Okay, so I will jump off my soapbox now, quite happily. So as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment on the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast, and you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley, or leave a comment on the Facebook post or LinkedIn post. And today's episode has been sponsored by my brand new book, Clinical Psychology Reflections, Volume 5, thoughts on mental health, clinical psychology and psychotherapy. So I always flat out love these clinical psychology reflection books because they're really fun, they're really engaging, and for me, they allow me to talk about different areas of clinical psychology and reflect on different things that I've seen, different things that I've learned, and it allows me to explore my own personal thoughts and feelings on it using my evidence-based approach and my prior knowledge. But it means I don't have to as vigorously reference it as my other psychology books, so there's a lot more freedom. And we cover a lot of personal mental health stuff, my opinions on the different therapies, different aspects of the clinical psychology and the profession. So this book is a lot of fun, it's really engaging, and lots of people flat out love these books. So that's Clinical Psychology Reflections, Volume 5, Available from all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, local bookstore, or local library if you requested. And you can get the AI generated audiobook from selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Kobo, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and Every, and selected library systems like Overdrive, Baker & Taylor, and Biblioteca. Otherwise, buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast. My time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And as always, massive thank you to my patrons because your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. So if you want to support the podcast on a monthly basis and get lots of great rewards, now you can at patreon.com/The Psychology World Podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So that's enough of the personality. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about all barriers in clinical psychology at the same time. This is a great episode. I'm really looking forward to it. So let's dive into it. When I was flicking through the December 22 edition of The Psychologist magazine, there was this article from a man talking about him feeling out of place and almost like an imposter on the UK's NHS Aspiring Psychologist scheme. It's a scheme designed to help people who cannot undertake a master's nor undertake unpaid work experience to get work experience and a partial education towards becoming a fully qualified psychologist. In the article, the man was talking about how much of a fraud he felt because he was white, wasn't from an ethnic minority, and he didn't have any other characteristics that would disadvantage him. The only reason he was on the scheme was because he was from a poor background, so he couldn't undertake unpaid work experience or do a master's degree. And then the article went on to talk about how he realised he did belong on the scheme, but it still made him think about his own privileges and that not all barriers in clinical psychology are the same height. The barriers to the profession were a lot lower for him compared to a black person from a poor background. Personally, this got me thinking about my own privileges and disadvantages, but firstly, I want to mention that this man might have been white and didn't have any other disadvantages beside the fact he was from a poor background, but he still 100% deserved to be on this scheme because he did meet the criteria. He needed the help, and it will benefit all his future clients that he's going to see. He was suffering from self-doubt and imposter syndrome, which is understandable, but he shouldn't have felt this way about himself. Moreover, I think the reason why this really got me thinking is because of my own appearance, status, and disadvantages, since I am a white male from a middle-class family in an extremely poor area. Like, when I realised how poor my area was in the grand scheme of things, I was quite shocked. Those are my advantages, and they've been very useful to me in my life. Also, I'm gay, but you would never know from looking at me, so I can hide that part of myself very well if needed, as well as I'm part of the trans community as a non-binary person, but again, you wouldn't be able to tell, so I can mask that side. Now, whether that's healthy or not, we can debate that for another time. Going back to the chapter. Then finally, I have suffered really bad mental health, and I have tons of lived experience of mental health difficulties behind me. You would think that would certainly be an advantage in that clinical psychology, and it very much can be, but people are still wary, and there are still unconscious biases at play during the recruitment process, even within clinical psychology. Yes, again, you would never know I've had horrific mental health in the past, because I hide it very well. Now, interestingly, you can tell I wrote this way before April, because I've been much more public because I've had to be, which is quite interesting. Therefore, what got me thinking about this article is that I definitely know how this man feels, since there have been times that I've wanted to apply for minority-focused bursaries, opportunities and more, but I've stopped myself because I don't feel disadvantaged at times. Of course, I am perfectly aware that I am disadvantaged at times, and there have been times when people in positions of power have made it very clear to me in very non-subtle ways. However, I keep telling myself the same lie over and over again, how I don't need these things, even though it would have helped me, my future and my career, if I had applied for these things a few years ago. It's interesting that I try to convince myself that I'm perfectly okay even now, but I am not, because I am disadvantaged and I shouldn't be scared to recognize it. On the whole, when it comes to myself, in the future, if there's an opportunity that comes up for minorities, then I need to be more open and honest with myself about looking into it and allowing myself to apply if I think I meet the criteria. For everyone else reading this, if there's an opportunity that you meet the criteria for, whether it's aimed at minorities or not, you should go for it. Getting a job in psychology is hard enough for all of us, but it's even harder for other people that face more barriers than most. Look for opportunities, exploit them, and help yourself to build a resume or career that you want. Don't let self-doubt, imposter syndrome, or anything else hold you back. So I really hope that you enjoy this slightly shorter podcast episode today, because it's very true, and personally I was quite surprised that I can really tell the difference between me now and when I wrote that, because my mental health has died so badly, and it's like I've not been able to do a lot of things for the past 7 months, but now I am actually getting a lot better. It's sort of like, oh, I should be able to do more. I should be able to do some stuff to help build my career in the next few months, which is a very scary idea because I've been so bad for 7 months. So it's interesting. Scary, but interesting. And if you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, then please check out Clinical Psychology Reflections, Volume 5, available wherever you buy books from, and in all the usual places. If you want to support the podcast on a monthly basis, then please head on over to patreon.com/The Psychology World Podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Con Whiteley. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwhiteley.net. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.